Hello, good afternoon, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here because, of course, I love to talk about sharks and rays, which collectively are known as elasmobranchs. So one of my missions is actually to elasmovangelize you. Hefe was absolutely right. 70% of our planet is covered with water, and yet we know more about the moon than we do a lot about our deep oceans and the wildlife that inhabits it. We don't have as much information on the diversity or the abundance of these species as we do in the terrestrial realm. And also terrestrial areas are actually protected to about the tune of 15% of land masses are under some form of protection versus at most 3% of the oceans. And so we're really lagging behind. And when it comes to the wildlife, well, we know there are about 350,000 elephants. We've done counts. That number is fairly robust. And we know a lot about their reproduction. We know a lot about their behavior. We know a lot about their threats. Same thing with lions, about 20,000. But when we look at the analogs in the sea of the elephants and the lions, we know very little indeed. And one of the focus of my work, whale sharks, which kind of kicked off my work in Belize in 1998, which is where I had the very good fortune of meeting Hefe, were whale sharks. And we found out that these animals have incredible migratory patterns, and they are able to dive to very deep depths, over 2,000 meters, over 6,600 feet, yet we still don't know what their population is. We think that they can live beyond 100 years, and that their reproductive maturity is at about 25 or 30 years. So these are very slow-growing animals. Manta rays, another analog of elephants in the sea. To show you how little we know about this largest ray, 20 feet in wingspan, only 7 years ago did we discover that there's actually 2 species. And in fact, now we're thinking there are 4 species of manta ray. Do we have any idea about their population? Do we have much idea about their behavior, etc.? Not as much as the terrestrial animals. Same thing with hammerheads. Very heavily hunted, primarily for their dorsal fin, because that is the most prized in the fin markets in Asia. We don't know their numbers, but we do know they are in dramatic decline, and they are now endangered to extinction because of that relentless fishing, overfishing, and that fin trade. Where does that leave these incredible species that we're starting to discover now, like the deep water sharks? Hexanchus nakamuri, we thought. Now it might be a Hexanchus vitilis. These 6-gilled deep-water sharks, we're just starting to scrape the surface of what we know in the deep, and lo and behold, discoveries keep coming every week, every month in the sea and with the sharks and rays. Who heard about the Greenland shark? Hands up. Well, for those who haven't, this is the longest living vertebrate. 272 years, potentially up to 400 years, growing at a centimeter a year, reaching sexual maturity at 150 years. Hell, I wouldn't want to wait 150 years for my first date. So you get an idea. These are slow history animals. They live long time. They reproduce late. They have very few young on average. Some of them have a reproductive pause of 5 years. And that is why they're so threatened with overexploitation. And what the overexploitation is primarily coming from overfishing. And a lot of this fishing is illegal, unregulated, and unreported. What is it driven by? In part, by the need for meat. Coastal communities, countries, developing countries, they need protein. One thing we have found in our work is that actually shark meat has a very high level of methylmercury. So for those of you who like Mako steak, choose a salmon instead. The fin trade, responsible for 73 million sharks taken from the sea every year. It's not good. It's not sustainable. The curio trade, next time you see a shark necklace, refrain from buying it. Leave the sharks in the sea. And why? Why does this overexploitation persist? In part because they have a terrible PR problem. Thank you, Peter Benchley. He spent the rest of his life actually trying to make up for the damage that Jaws did to shark populations globally. And we're actually getting there. It's great. But in a lot of developing countries, tropical, coastal, developing countries, we still have a long way to go. And that really is our mission with MarAlliance. We're working in 9 different countries. We have a tiny team of 12, including 2 volunteers. And yet, we're trying to make strides in changing these attitudes and perceptions towards sharks, in trying to support and sustain and promote sustainable fisheries that don't use nets, that don't use long lines, and that by working with communities through education will also help the sharks and the rays of the world. So where do we start? We started with these baselines. Why? Because we don't know much about what we have in these coastal countries. 50% of species are supposed to be in coastal areas of the world. Yet we really don't have many baselines. And we need to have those kind of baselines of what we have and how many of the different species we have in order to put into effect strong management, enforcement, and such. So one of the first things that we did is, along with baseline work, is to actually start a public perception campaign, changing attitudes, driving the love for sharks and rays. And this is Beto, the bull shark. He's one of our favorite mascots. Some of you might have met him last year, actually. Lot of work with children, lot of work at fairs over the years. We've been working with the public in Belize, and we're starting to spread out to several other countries now. And it was put to the test, all of this public education and outreach work was put to the test this last February. This is a key site for us in terms of the conservation of sharks and rays in Belize, because the sharks at this particular spot, called Lighthouse Reef Atoll, actually feed into a whole host of other areas throughout the Mesoamerican Reef. They seed the barrier reef, they seed the Mesoamerican Reef of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. And we were sent these pictures anonymously, and we were given a lot of tip-offs by people who were so disgusted that this had happened. And this is a major ecotourism area. These are animals that we had tracked and followed for years as well. And why were they killed? Mainly to produce meat for the Lenten season, for the Easter season, when you're supposed to eat fish. And they were going directly over to Guatemala as meat and then fins for the Asian fin trade. We put this on social media, it went viral, and as a result of the public in Belize saying, no more, we don't want this, we now have a dialogue with our government about how we're going to reduce the use of nets, long lines, and try to maintain sharks alive, especially as we have discovered they're actually worth at least $5 million for the ecotourism. Our public campaign would not have been quite as successful if we hadn't started our Kids Meet Sharks program. And that is where we visited so many schools in numerous coastal communities, and we engaged the children, and not just about sharks and rays, but about sustainable fisheries, responsible seafood consumption, the role of marine protected areas, and how each and every one could make a difference for the seas, and notably sharks and rays. It's been one of the most gratifying programs that I've created, and all of our coordinators and our team love running this program. It is now expanded to Cabo Verde, to Mexico, Honduras, and hopefully we'll be able to get it to several more countries. We don't just visit the classrooms. we take the children out to the sea. Sometimes it's the first time they've ever seen the barrier reef. Sometimes the first time they've seen a live shark. And especially girls who don't have so many role models in the sciences, we love it. Half our team are women, and we love to show the young girls that they have opportunities beyond nursing and teaching in some of the more traditional professional roles. And we don't just leave them on the boat. We throw them in the water with the sharks. And you know what? 50% of them don't even know how to swim. We safeguard for that, of course. By the end of the day, we can't get them out of the water. I love it. I love it. It's one of my absolute favorite programs. But another one of my favorite programs is working with our community fishers, traditional fishers. They rely on the sea. They have an unbelievable knowledge of the sea, PhDs of the sea. And integrating them into the baseline research that we're doing has been so fulfilling, so incredibly illuminating, bringing their knowledge together with ours. And here we have Hilmar Salazar in the yellow shirt. He was recently awarded a Wildlife Warrior Award from the Houston Zoo, who is one of our partners. And he is teaching Henry Mesquita from Mexico how to enter data and how to do some of the monitoring work. Through this peer-to-peer program, we're training a whole host of other fishers, Mexico, Cape Verde, Micronesia, Cuba, Panama, all the countries where we're working, and we're finding this to be an amazing model. Once they're trained, we step out of the picture and we're just there to support and help. So we're getting a lot of this baseline work done with the fishers, and it is their voice who is being projected about sharks and rays and other large marine wildlife. I just wanted to show you 3 of the monitoring techniques that we tend to use. This one is the transect, the humble underwater visual census. Humble, you might say, except we swim 1 kilometer at a go. Some of you in this room might have even swum those transects. And let me tell you, in this last year, we have swum the equivalent of San Francisco to Portland. We have thighs of steel. We also use camera trapping, just like the terrestrial wildlife team. Very cheap contraption with PVC, GoPro, little bit of bait. Awesome. And just like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. This is a tiger shark in Cape Verde. Good bait. Is that a GoPro? Is that a GoPro? Hey, it is a GoPro. Let me try that bait again. Whoa, that was sharp. Whoa. So we have found here nothing was known about sharks and rays in Cabo Verde. And along with our coordinator, Zeddy Seymour, our national coordinator, and a host of traditional fishers, we're establishing the first baseline for sharks and rays there. And we're finding incredible diversity like we've not found in a lot of other tropical countries. The favorite method in our monitoring, the one that all the fishers want to take part in, catching the sharks, of course. But you know what? They catch them, they measure them, they determine the sex, so we can determine whether they're male, female, adult, juvenile. We get an idea of the demography of the population. Then they get to tag them, and they get to release them. And I have to tell you, I've worked with some hardcore shark fishers who at the end of our week, we don't say anything about shark fishing, nothing. They're practically in tears saying, how can I possibly convert to just doing monitoring? I don't want to kill any more sharks. That's pretty powerful. And if you wonder where all this monitoring and all this data feeds into, I'll give you an example from the whale sharks. So all the work that I did on behavior and movement, population, all went towards the declaration of the Gladden Spit Marine Reserve in Belize. It underpinned the declaration of the Biosphere Reserve the Whale Shark Biosphere Reserve in Mexico, and is now helping to propose an expansion of that Biosphere Reserve. So we are definitely integrating all of our data and policy, all of our data and work into policy. And I just want to say that we sometimes get some really, really cool discoveries at the same time. Here's a great hammerhead shark. They're endangered to extinction. Why do we know that? Because we've seen massive declines in their populations. Beautiful animal. That cephalofoil for the head, incredible ability to navigate. Ooh, can see 360 degrees. I know there are many parents in this room who would like that ability. I certainly would with my children. We put on a triaxial accelerometer tag on some of these animals. And you know, it basically determines the three-dimensional swimming in space, many data points recorded a second, but we were having problems deciphering the data. What are these animals doing? So we thought they just swam straight, and guess what? They swim on their side, and you think, why would they do that? They swim at a 50 to 70 degree pitch, and why? Dr. Nick Payne, one of my colleagues, said, hey, I'm going to make a little model. I'm going to figure it out in the flow chamber. Lo and behold, they are minimizing their energy while they're swimming if they swim on their side and use their dorsal fin as a pectoral fin. Go figure. Except competitive swimmers have figured that trick out. And if you see people doing the fish kick now, that's becoming more and more well known, you'll see them going almost 10% faster than everybody else. Hammerheads and competitive swimmers, convergent evolution. Who would have known? And I wanted to say that a lot of this work doesn't just stay at the community level. It's been tremendous working with traditional fishers, with students, and such. But we need it to actually change policy. We need it to change decision makers' minds as well. And so that's one of the reasons why we've helped create national shark advisory meetings, or committees, sorry, in Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, we hope in several other countries. And what we do is we take all of that information that we've gathered at the traditional fishing community level, and we bring it up to the policy level so that ultimately when there are protective status or measures that are proposed, they are a direct reflection of what the fishermen have gathered and what the fishermen have actually proposed to these decision makers. So it's a way of linking the grassroots fishing community with decision makers. And that's been very popular. And then what happens is that some of those policies get kicked up to a higher level. And I just show this because we just had the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, and big win. Thresher sharks, silky sharks, and Manta Rays, the cousins of mantas, are now listed on Appendix 2. What does that mean? It just means that now their trade will be regulated and monitored globally. This is a convention with teeth. So we have these amazing policy wins, amazing. But really, what it comes down to is people. Networking, creating more champions, more supporters, replicating all of this work across multiple countries to try and go against the tide that we've seen and against the unfortunate perception that people have of sharks. We created the Caribbean Shark and Ray Network last year, and we've got 24 partners in other countries throughout the Caribbean who are now trying to do exactly the same type of work. So we're absolutely thrilled. But it comes down to individuals. And this is Zé Luis Montero. Zé Luis Montero is a traditional fisher from Cape Verde. He hails from a family of die-hard fishermen. I catch it, I kill it, and I'm going to eat it, including sharks. So when we brought him into the baseline work that we're doing, That's how he spoke to the first shark that we caught. He was so excited. A tiger shark. Oh my God. And to hold it and tag it, we put a satellite tag on it. He couldn't contain his excitement. And immediately after releasing it, this is what he did. He jumped on the side of the boat. That is the funana, which, let me tell you, if you don't think you have supple hips, you'll definitely get them after the funana, which is the Cape Verdean dance of choice. So I invite you to share Zé Luis's enthusiasm in protecting sharks and rays. And really, my mission is to see many, many more Zé Luises in the world. Thank you.